Back in her electorate of Newcastle yesterday, Jodie McKay couldn't praise the new Premier enough.
Oh, Nathan's a fantastic bloke, and he is a great bloke.
Apparently, the feeling's mutual. The Premier promoted the member for Newcastle to the New South Wales front bench this afternoon, although he's still got some pronunciations to learn.
I can announce the new faces, and they are Philip Costa, Michael Daly, Virginia Judge, Jodie McKay.
While portfolios won't be announced until tomorrow, Ms McKay knows of at least one she'll receive.
I would think that I've got the Minister for the Hunter portfolio. We needed to have a voice in the Cabinet, and certainly my colleagues were united in that view.
She's also admitted she's likely to be handed a second portfolio. Ms McKay will take over as Minister for the Hunter from dumped Treasurer Michael Costa and says her first priority will be to improve state and local government relations. While she's only been in politics for a year and a half, she claims to be ready for the job ahead.
You know, I've got a lot to learn, but I had a lot to learn back in March, and I had a lot to learn back in 2006 when I was pre-selected. And I will make mistakes.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
After the pounding both beach and board riders have copped over the first 3 days, One Mile Beach looked a different place for the finals. Although much calmer than previous days, there was still enough swell to test the next generation of surf stars. Tyler Wright from the New South Wales South Coast was in the box seat from the start of the women's decider, forcing Kiwi Paige Hareb to come from behind, something she did with a 9-point ride to head to shore with the title and be chaired up the beach as champion. Merriweather's Jessie Adam was the best of the locals, reaching the semi-finals of the men's division, only to run into a red-hot Tamarau McComb. The 16-year-old Tahitian, who's based himself on the Gold Coast purely to surf this series, marched into another decider where he beat Lincoln Taylor to claim his second Australasian Pro Junior Tournament win this year.
It's a big step up for the newcomer to politics. 2 portfolios after just 18 months' experience. But Jodie McKay says she's ready to go and even has a plan of action.
There's a lot to do, a lot of work, got to get some staff and set up offices.
Ms McKay promised to be more hands-on and in closer contact with local government than previous Minister for the Hunter dumped Treasurer Michael Costa.
My style will be very, very different to the previous minister, but I think he did a good job and now we're in the next phase.
And business leaders are counting on it.
Oh, look, Jodie McKay is a good choice. She's well known to people here in the Hunter. She works well with industry, and the Hunter Business Chamber and industries here in the Hunter look forward to working with her.
The Hunter Regional Tourism Organisation is planning to take advantage of Jodie's self-proclaimed dedication to the region, saying her new role as Minister for Tourism has come at an excellent time.
They've announced $40 million in funding for tourism in the state, so now's the time for Jodie to get in and do some hard work.
Madeline Bond, NBN News. Conducting routine patrols in Newcastle's pubs and clubs over the weekend, the last thing police expected was to have a gun pulled on them. Officers say the person behind the prank wasn't in costume and had no reason to carry the lifelike toy.
They were actually in plain clothes, well presented, and they confronted a police officer with what he believed was a firearm.
In a pub?
In a pub, yes. Well, there's a number of other people around, and remembering that these places are poorly lit.
The venue was so dim, officers thought they were under attack.
In that small split seconds that the police officer initially saw it, he felt that it was a firearm.
Police say the man was lucky not to be shot.
If they feel threatened enough, they actually are authorised to use their firearm, and we would hate to see that happen.
In this case, the man got off with a warning, police describing the incident as a poorly thought out joke. But officers are warning against bringing toy or replica guns into the city, saying anyone caught with one could face harsh penalties. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Researcher Matthew Cox has been handed a golden opportunity, a scholarship to find the key that could unlock the mystery of multiple sclerosis. He'll spend the next 3 years comparing the genetic profile of 180 MS sufferers against those of people without the disease.
The scholarship will also enable me to go to international conferences and develop collaborations with other people in my field, which is something that, as a young researcher, is very important to me.
One of the first participants in Matthew's research is Vicky Woods, a Maitland counsellor and ambassador for the MS Society.
When I was first diagnosed, my son was 5 months old. I was in my first business, or actually still the same business, for 18 months, and I was 25 years of age, and it was without a doubt the most devastating thing or news that I had ever heard.
MS is the most common neurological disorder in young Australians, affecting approximately 15,000 every year. No definitive cause has been found, but better diagnosis and treatment could be just around the corner.
So within the next couple of years, hopefully we should know the genetic basis of MS.
Lucy Wilson, NBN News.
The kids at Newcastle Baptist Community Preschool love morning tea time. And why wouldn't you when Mum's packed this?
Egg and olives and avocado.
Of course, some preschoolers can be fussy eaters, but nutritionists say there's a healthy snack to suit every taste.
What did you have to eat?
Marguerites.
Joey, what did you have for your morning tea?
Strawberries and Pikes.
The humble lunchbox has become the latest battleground in the war on childhood obesity. This guide from Good for Kids, Good for Life aims to arm parents with the knowledge and inspiration they need to pack healthy meals.
So what we want to see in lunchboxes are some dairy foods like milk and cheese, fruit, so either dried, fresh or tinned fruit is all good, and I guess the thing that we really want to see in lunchboxes is more vegetables.
Most kids will eat some fruit, but veggies are proving a problem.
Only about 50% of kids 2 to 5 meet their vegetable requirement, so putting some in the lunchbox will help.
The kits include reward charts as well as colourful stickers and magnets. They're being distributed to parents through daycare centres and preschools from this week.
It was a change in 84-year-old Ken Rush's routine that alerted neighbours their elderly friend could be in trouble.
I'm up a few times during the night, and by about 2:30 when his lights and air conditioning was still going, I knew something was wrong.
After being unable to contact Ken all morning, Colleen called the police at midday. Officers arrived at the scene and, fearing the worst, chose a bold course of action.
Broke into the house with the assistance of the fire brigade, where they found the 84-year-old man on the floor, unconscious and needing urgent medical assistance.
Ken had suffered a massive stroke and was near death. Police say Colleen's call made all the difference.
Well, in effect, they've saved his life. Without, these types of things coming to the attention of emergency services, we wouldn't be acting upon them.
Ken's son expressed his gratitude today.
Thank you, Colleen.
Police have this advice for anyone with elderly neighbours.
Have conversation with their neighbours and know what their whereabouts are and their movements, so that if they don't see them for a number of days, they can raise the alarm and perhaps save someone's life, as has happened in this instance.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
It wasn't the Melbourne Cup, but Robert Thompson carved a unique spot in Australian turf history when he rode promised first past the post 2 months ago. And he did it all from the country, staying true to his Cessnock roots through a long career which has no signs of slowing. Today, with 36 years of travel, serious injury and the rigours of jockey life, his hometown celebrated both his record-breaking achievement and his reputation as a man of integrity.
I'm a real country boy and I love Cessnock, and I was very proud of what happened this morning.
By this afternoon, he was back to work at Wyong, the track where he had his first taste of success in 1973. The man who used to hold the record, the late great Jack Thompson, kept riding until he was 62. So at the age of 50, Robert's wife Jenny, his mum and the entire Cessnock community are sure they'll be singing his praises for years to come. Lucy Wilson, NBN News.
By the looks of him today, you'd think Corey Patterson had taken one knock to the head too many. Arriving late for his team's traditional Mad Monday post-season gathering, it was with good reason, given he'd spent the morning in Sydney with a brain injury specialist.
But it looks like it's just I've just got some bleeding, some bruising on my brain, and it sounds bad, but it's nowhere near as bad as the tumour, which is good.
It follows routine medical scans taken after being heavily concussed against Melbourne more than a week ago. Some irregularities causing the concern and follow-up checks.
Relief, mate, a bit of relief, but he also said that just wait till Wednesday, but it looks like it's going to be fine, which is good.
As far as his own form this season, just his second in the NRL, the young forward appears to be his own worst critic after a year impressing some good judges.
I thought my defence got better, but yeah, still a bit disappointed in my attacking side, but hopefully next year will be the year where both come together.
The club's football committee did just that today to discuss a range of matters with a view to next season, including the playing future of centre Adam McDougall, who's indicated he's prepared to stay rather than play rugby union overseas. Meanwhile, they remain locked on a rival club's outside back for next season, but it's understood talks have been delayed because he's playing in the finals. Jim Callanan, NBN News. After watching both lower grades win the lead-up game, Singleton's top grade side was understandably fired up, but Brad Schultz took things too far. His left hand had Michael Deakin down for the count and him in hot water. Schultz sent off just 3 minutes into the decider. Greta Branxton made immediate use of the extra man advantage, Tim Lantry scooting away for first points. And when Aaron Clark was sent try-bound, the sniff of an upset hit the air. Once the greyhound steadied though, it was all one-way traffic. When Jamie Garland crossed, they were back on level terms. And that's when Singleton really fired up. A third quick-fire try had their noses in front. And with Alan Harris's radar right boot on target, they went to the sheds leading 18-10. The winger continued his point-scoring blitz not long into the second, finishing off a great team try. After missing last year's final series, he made up for lost time, scoring a hat-trick on his way to 20 points for the game. Greta Branxton just couldn't stem the flow of points against as Singleton attacked in waves. It ended 36-10 and rounded out a perfect day for the home side. And for the second season in a row, they got to do this.
The explosion shattered windows and damaged a customer's car at about 2:45 this morning at the Lorna Street business. Police are investigating the cause of the blast, trying to determine what kind of explosive was used.
We'll have to wait till the experts have a look at the scene and do the examination and get back to us on that one.
The owner, Stuart Alley, says his shop front has been targeted at least 3 times over the last 8 weeks, something the police are keen to follow up.
If that's the case, it is a concern and we'll be looking into those allegations as well.
They're calling for information from the public about anyone known to be making explosives or
even anyone who has some sort of vendetta against the automotive workshop in Lorna Street.
In July last year, the hairdresser around the corner was also targeted.
We have had a couple of explosions over the last couple of years in the area. At this stage it's too early to say whether there's any link between this explosion and the other explosions, but if there is, we will certainly conduct an investigation in relation to that.
Penny Evans, NBN News.
From under 10s to over 35s, all clubs were notified of the decision yesterday, the message relayed last night.
So, yeah, you miss out. Sorry, girls.
John Moore coaches the under-16 D-grade girls from Adamstown. His players couldn't believe the news after a hard-fought season.
They started last and then ended up fourth and they won 4-0 last week and they've proved their point. They deserve to be there.
The wet weather forced last weekend's round of finals to be abandoned, so the associations decided the teams which finished the regular season first and second automatically qualify for the grand finals.
To me is a blatant disregard for clubs who form this association.
But late this afternoon, the Interdistricts Football Board reversed its decision after clubs from the Hunter region offered their support. They've made grounds, match officials and volunteers available. Preliminary fixtures will now be played this weekend, with grand finals to be held the following weekend beginning Friday the 19th.
A cough, a headache, fever and muscle aches. If those symptoms sound familiar, you could have a bout of influenza and you wouldn't be alone. There's been a sharp increase in cases, prompting a warning from health professionals to stay away from those vulnerable to severe complications.
When these cases are introduced into larger community settings like schools or aged care, then flu explodes, and that's what we're seeing at the moment.
Emergency departments, including the John Hunter Hospital, are already stretched to capacity. Their advice is to stay in bed or see your GP or pharmacist.
Perhaps the best thing is to rest at home and take things to resolve those symptoms rather than coming to the emergency department. There are a lot of very sick patients here, paediatrics, adults, and we need to make sure that you don't pass those symptoms on.
Influenza has the potential to be a very serious infection, particularly for the elderly and people with other medical conditions such as asthma and diabetes. And for those over 65, the influenza vaccination is highly recommended. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
So the ambulance will respond with their ambulance service, either general duties ambulance or paramedics, and the fire brigade will respond to carry out the rescue.
The Hunter Business Chamber brought together more than 60 of the region's major industrial players to put forward a united response to the proposed carbon trading scheme.
We want some certainty that industry here will be protected.
Given the Hunters' industrial focus, the region's been identified as an area set to be hit hard by carbon trading.
If it goes ahead as is planned, there are major companies in the region who are considering their future viability here.
I think the big test will be in the short term when we look at the policy detail. That is when we'll truly know if government has been listening.
Many want to know how they'll be nursed through the changes.
It's really important that that emissions trading scheme gets it right. Otherwise, it really does have the potential to kill the patient.
Buying more time is also a concern, with the proposed 2010 start date looming.
We need to ensure that the economy is protected. We need to ensure that those industries that underpin our regional economy have the ability to maintain the jobs growth and investment and expansion into the future.
Penny Evans, NBN News.
It's an Olympic silver lining for cyclist Ben Demery, who, with pilot Sean Hopkins, powered around the 1 kilometre time trial in a Games record time. Great Britain might have pipped them for the gold on the last ride of the night, but the Aussies celebrated like they'd won, and Kurt Fearnley looks in ominous form. A hot favourite in a range of events, he blitzed the field in heats of the 5,000 metres.
I'm feeling better than what I've ever felt before. I think that if I have a good roll, a good couple of runs now, I think I might be able to do something special.
You couldn't blame Edmundo Zura for thinking he may need this, with critics already on his case after just 3 rounds of the A-League. Still coming to terms with life both on and off the field in Australia, the Ecuadorian is under increasing pressure to perform, but he has support where it counts.
He's got to adapt to a league. I find it very difficult the first couple of games in Japan. You just got to adapt, and when you do adapt, that's when you start, scoring goals, and it's only a matter of time.
Although embarrassed by that 5-0 drubbing in Melbourne, Griffith says this isn't the time to point fingers of blame.
If everyone starts getting on the bandwagon and start bagging him or whatever, it's not good for us and it's not good for him either.
He just wants the team to redeem themselves against Sydney FC on Saturday night, but there remains real concern for brother Adam. Still at a loss as to what's causing him serious leg pain, Adam only returned to light training today, but understands there's pressure on him to play.
I think Dutchie wants me to play this week, so that's the goal.
Booked in for further scans tomorrow, there's little sympathy for him at home.
This problem he's got with some neural thing, I don't know, he's just non-stop telling me about it and how bad it is and that, but I just said man up.
Jim Callanan, NBN News.
The Department of Environment and Climate Change is talking tough, giving waste oil processor TruGain only a few weeks to stop the odour or lose its licence.
It's really up to them, and the direction we've issued means that if they haven't addressed the problems to our satisfaction by the 30th of this month, it means they have to cease operation of their plant.
Hopefully it will end up with a result, meaning that we get a reduction in the pollution on the community and it's not just more talk.
Residents set up the anti-stink group in March to demand action after years of complaining terrible smells were making them ill.
It's absolutely disgusting. You can't believe that this is happening in Australia in 2008.
The department surveyed the area and yesterday named and blamed the company, which wouldn't speak with NBN News today.
It is a very drastic step. We don't do it very often. It's a very significant thing to do, to remove an operating licence from a premises, but we believe that the circumstances are such that the action is warranted.
However, Karen Turner believes TruGain isn't the only offender in the industrial estate.
There are other pollution complaints that have a different type of fingerprint.
The residents' next push is to get the air quality monitoring station installed that they say they were promised several years ago.
There's been a question mark hanging over the future of David Jones in the CBD for years, with sales on the decline and the mall losing customers. But today, DJs made a commitment to Newcastle, signing on as the only department store in GPT's overhaul of the CBD.
We're going to continue to trade in our existing store until early 2010, at which time we will close for approximately 2 years while GPT rebuild the precinct, rebuild the shopping centre, and then we'll be looking to reopen again in sometime during 2012.
But GPT still needs to consult with the community, finalise plans and gain approvals from council, so setting a reopening date may be jumping the gun. The developer has only just signed an agreement to buy the land needed for the new retail development, including the mall parking station.
So we've announced today that we've concluded a land agreement with Newcastle City Council on the remaining parcels of land to complete the footprint.
As for the 150 casual and permanent DJ staff, management has promised it will redeploy them while the new store is built, which could mean working at Katara or Tuggerah or even moving to Sydney.
So I think there's ample opportunity over the period of time for us to accommodate all of our staff's requirements.
David Jones hopes a larger store with more brands will see sales increase by 50%. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
To the average person, this might look like just another cow, but to these breeders who've travelled from Brazil, America, the UK and New Zealand, you can't beat the red ruby. One of the world's oldest recognised breeds, the Devon is famed for its fertility and ability to fatten in tough conditions.
They actually are easier to handle than a lot of people.
They're a breed that I think is not really recognised for its potential.
It's 20 years since Australia last hosted the International Devon Conference, and the local industry is keen to show how far we've come. Pauline Wood's Lower Belford stud was the first stop on the tour that will take in more than 20 farms around the state ahead of a special sale in Gunnedah and Talkfest in Port Macquarie.
I think our Devons are pretty well up there and I think as good if not better than any of the other countries.
Penny Evans, NBN News.
Whether it be face-to-face or via the telephone advice line, many hunter families have used the after-hours service. About 240 local GPs are rostered on to operate the clinics, and as this graph shows, they're alleviating pressure from hospitals and filling the gaps in the healthcare system.
We've been able to keep over 10,000 patients a year out of emergency departments and for those patients to be able to access the GP care they need.
And while GP Access celebrates its 5th birthday, funding for the successful and unique service remains uncertain.
We see the service operating and doing a really good job for the local community, and then every 1 or 2 years we have to fight for another contract.
While the Rudd government has promised 3 years funding, the federal member for Newcastle, Sharon Grierson, says she'll keep working with the Health Minister to provide as much support and certainty as possible. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
A 000 call brought police to the house in Benito Street at Corlett about 11 o'clock this morning. Inside they found a 75-year-old woman covered in her own blood and an 81-year-old man standing over her, allegedly holding a can of petrol and a match.
The man was tipping petrol through the residence and was in possession of a match, and police were fortunately able to remove that from him and apprehend him before any further damage could occur.
Senior Constable Brad Patmore used his baton to knock the match out of the man's hand before subduing him, while Constable Michelle Burgess began treating the injured woman.
The officers have done very well. This had the potential to be much worse, and I think their very quick action has averted that from occurring.
Neighbours couldn't believe what they were seeing. Nerily Fleming spoke to the victim as she was being put in the ambulance.
I had a lot of blood all over her and everything, and she just asked me if I would ring her niece.
The 75-year-old was flown to Newcastle's John Hunter Hospital with severe head injuries, while her alleged attacker continued to prove quite a handful for police.
And then he was quite belligerent, I suppose you'd say, when they tried to put him in the police paddy wagon. He really didn't want to go. He sort of fought them all the way and then was kicking the van when he was in there.
He was taken to Raymond Terrace Police Station and late this afternoon was charged with attempted murder.
You just don't know what happens behind closed doors, unfortunately. But on the outside, both of them were very nice people.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
For a little handmade company here in Newcastle in regional Australia, we are just so thrilled. It just means so much to us.
For Brian Smith, it's been an extended recovery this week, and in summing up the season, at least one highlight had nothing to do with football.
I've got to say, it was the most enjoyable Mad Monday I've ever been on.
partly because I survived it intact, and partly because I loved the way they enjoyed each other's company.
The Knights finished 9th this season, 6 places better than 2007, and with a team he selected.
Based on last year's figures, we made remarkable improvements in our defence. Our attack improved as well, and overall, we were a fringe top 8 team.
In the wash-up, the Knights beat 3 sides, which would go on to finish inside the top 4. The win over Melbourne, the defining moment. The match would also be one of 8 tight games where the result was decided by a converted try or less, 3 of them won by Newcastle. As for individuals, the coach singled out James McManus, the only Knight to play every game this year. Corey Patterson got special mention too, while Kurt Gidley's been slated as a natural leader in replacing former captain Danny Badiris. His departure could yet be followed by Adam McDougall, who's still to decide where his future lies, while for those who remain, Smith says Junior Sau's rise is testament to the competition for spots.
Some players who right now are sitting pretty comfortably, and we all see them as, having made achievements, will be under threat next year for their positions.
Adam McIlwright, NBN News. Bowling for the kids at St Columban's Mayfield today. Dominic Thornley's shown he's just as comfortable with the bat, especially at number 1 Sports Ground.
Third period cup match it was at the time. I managed to score 140, which is my first class 100 on debut, so I got fond memories of Newcastle.
That was in 2004, and he returns in January with the Blues for another 4-dayer, but not before captaining country in this year's State Series. He'll be joined by 8 Newcastle players, 2 of them current teammates in Mark Cameron and Bert Cockley. Back to Beijing, and you get the feeling Heath Francis would still be celebrating, and why not? Not only did he win the 200-metre final, but ran it in 21.75 seconds, breaking a 16-year-old world record.
We dream about this as kids, and to have it happen to us, it's just amazing. I'm living the dream.
Heath thanked his mum Margaret, who watched from the bird's nest, while for those in Burrell, there was this.
And hi to everyone back home as well. I'll see you soon.
And a different pace at Raymond Terrace for the Multi-Disability State Bowls Championships. On his home green, Ed Golan qualified for Sunday's pairs final with Sydney's Joanne Hunter after winning today's semi in a tiebreak. Adam McIlwright, NBN News.
There was a warm welcome for the new Minister for the Hunter from a group of like-minded women this morning. It was Jodie McKay's first public engagement since becoming the first female minister based in Newcastle.
A lot happens in a week. It's been a tumultuous time and, as I've said, quite emotional.
It will be a steep learning curve for Miss McKay, who's only been in politics for 18 months. Now she wears 3 hats, juggling the tourism and hunter portfolios, along with representing her own electorate.
The Newcastle electorate is obviously where I started, and it is about making sure that the people of this city are looked after and have a strong voice in government. That will always be my first and foremost priority.
But she's going to need to fight hard for her region's infrastructure requirements due to the woeful state of the finances.
We have a lot of needs here, and what it is about weighing them up in the context of the budget situation that the Premier has outlined.
She wouldn't be drawn on her priorities. Instead, Minister McKay explained she's convened the Hunter Labor Task Force to help draw up a wish list. But nothing is a certainty, therefore the Tilligra Dam, the Swansea Bridge, the Glendale Interchange, the third Hunter River crossing, along with many health and transport projects, remain in limbo. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
The attack at Corlett yesterday left 75-year-old Mary Barbara with serious head injuries after it's alleged her husband of 55 years beat her with a steel mallet. 81-year-old Eddie Barbara appeared in Maitland Court today on a charge of attempted murder. In facts tendered, police say the assault followed an argument about whether the pair should attend the local bingo game. They say Mary wanted to go, but Eddie didn't, and as she turned to make the bed, she was struck from behind. The court was told that Mr Barbara is suffering a combination of anxiety, depression and diabetes, and that in recent months severe insomnia had pushed him towards feelings of suicide. As a result, Magistrate Stephen Jackson ordered he be held in custody for the purpose of a psychiatric assessment. The couple had lived at their Corlett home for the past 7 years, and Mr Barbara's solicitor, Julia Clark, told the court there was no suggestion of any prior domestic violence. The case will be moved to Newcastle Court next week. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
The size of Taya Gibson's coffin brought home the tragedy of her premature passing. The 2-year-old died last month after wandering into her grandparents' burning house. She was following her grandmother, who was searching the home for her partner. Over 300 mourners farewelled the toddler, with sisters Chelsea and Kalisha leading the funeral procession. Mum Lana and Dad Jason followed, carrying the tiny casket. Surrounded by relatives and friends, the family said goodbye to their little girl. Grandfather Neil Tarrant overcome with grief. Brett Kamali was among mourners. The Cronulla Sharks player will host a golf day on October 9 at Nelson Bay to raise money for the Gibsons. In a touching symbolic gesture, the Gibsons released helium balloons as their final farewell. Donations to the Gibson Family Relief Fund have reached $20,000, with captain of the under-20 Newcastle Knights, Callan Richardson, handing over $2,000 on his team's behalf.
Still a big country town, and it's wonderful that so many people have managed to get behind it.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
This is the grand vision for the $6 million surf house project, and it could now become reality within 3 years. The plan means the dilapidated building, which has been neglected for more than 12 years, will be knocked down. The new 3-storey structure will include a cafe, public amenities, a function centre, bar and restaurant, all enjoying breathtaking vistas.
You couldn't get a better spot as far as being spectacular views and access to the beach.
Keith Stronach, who is part of a consortium along with the Merewether Residents Group, announced they've signed a 50-year lease of the land with Newcastle City Council. After copping flack over council's inaction, it's welcome news for John Tate 2 days before voters go to the polls. Both he and Keith Stronach denied it had been orchestrated that way, saying it's been held up for several weeks by the Department of Lands and solicitors.
This announcement, I thought, could have been made a week or so ago, but it's taken that time.
Construction may begin within 3 to 6 months. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
To most of us, $1 million seems like a lot of money, but in filmmaking terms, it's just a drop in the bucket. That's how much Newcastle writer Gerald Lawson had to raise after realising no production companies would bring his screenplay to life.
I managed to beg, borrow and steal and raise enough money to make the film.
The result is a film called Blue Lies, which centres on the story of a doctor who's being blackmailed after being caught breaking the rules. Apart from lead actor Emily Stewart, the film is a who's who of Newcastle locals, like David Yarrow, Rod Ansell, Barry Shepherd and Alison Cox.
It's not every day that something like this comes along in Newcastle.
and just to have the opportunity to work with such experienced directors and crew and other actors locally that you don't always get the chance to work with was great.
The film opens in Newcastle tonight, followed by a season in regional New South Wales.
This is a low-budget event. We're grateful that it was made. We're grateful that it's being released. Anything beyond that is a bonus.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
When Newcastle was humiliated 5-0 in Melbourne 2 weeks ago, the international transfer window was still open. Unsure whether he was staying or going, it's fair to say Jade North wasn't at his best. The same's been said of our other national representative who's also in the midst of contract negotiations, keeper Ante Kovic.
There was too many players on the day that didn't want to be there. I guess they probably had other things on their mind.
Both return from Socceroos duty tomorrow night, but Gary Van Egmond has a contingency if they're not fit to back up.
Started last week, Dutchie told me to prepare as if I was going to play, so that's what I'm doing. So it's been probably about 2 years, and my last game I got injured, so hopefully get a chance this week.
Having conceded 9 goals in just 3 games, the Jets are under pressure to sort out their defensive problems, and the coach didn't mince words when letting the players know about it at training today.
Our build-up play is very, very important for us to create opportunities in that final third. I wasn't too happy with a couple of plays that happened today, and people found out.
There's no doubting the commitment of hard-working left-back Matt Thompson, though, who's staring down the barrel of an A-League record 75 appearances.
It's a good little milestone, but I'd like to remember the 75th game as 3 points.
And some positive news on the injury front, with Adam Griffiths completing his first full training session since leg pain ruled him out of that victory clash everyone's trying so hard to forget. Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
Lochinvar Prado out of the back straight, raced away 2 in front. In second place, Elite Oriental, Penny Cool and Sendine Shelby around the turn. Lochinvar Prado, he's got it one. Lochinvar Prado, too good for Elite Oriental. Sendine Shelby, Penny Cool, followed up by Corvette Merlin, and then quickly Tommy, and last of all, True Sunrise. The Gordon.
The Bickham coal mine is proposed for such a pristine area on the Pages River near Murrurundi that the state government took the unusual step of demanding a water study be undertaken before a project assessment could be completed. That plan was submitted earlier this year, and now the state government has told Bickham Coal it's not good enough.
If the mining company says this is what we think is adequate, then surely the community has a right to see what the mining company believes is adequate.
The Department of Planning wants to know more about the potential impacts on the river and surrounding aquifers and how mine water would be held on site. The exact concerns of frustrated residents who say delays in the process means delays for the whole community.
This idea of waiting and going back and forth again and again just delays the final decision. And of course, every time there is a delay, this impacts on all the other developments in the area.
The company declined to speak to NBN News today, but a spokesman said they intend to resubmit the water plan once some alterations have been made. But those opposing the mine are asking how long do they need?
The mining company has had 2.5 years to work on this report, so one would have thought they'd get it right.
Penny Evans, NBN News.
It's quality childcare like this, which could soon become even less affordable. 7 council-owned childcare centres throughout Newcastle are being asked to sign 5-year leases with an average annual rent of $10,000 instead of the $1 fee they now pay. Parents are most likely to be asked to cover the extra cost through increased fees.
Well, it's going to be at least $1 a day per child. And of course, we also have to raise the fees each year to cover the cost of wages. So the parents are going to get a double whammy this year.
And even that might not be enough to make the rent.
We're over ratio staff, so maybe the only way would be to reduce staff, and we don't want to do that. We want to keep our high quality here. Children are just too precious to make a profit.
In a statement, Newcastle City Council said while it's not immediately increasing childcare centre rents, it is talking to organisations to see what impact any future rent hikes could have.
On paper it says it's a consultation process, but the lease is being drawn up.
Centre directors will hold a meeting next week to discuss their options. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
They say to vote is a privilege. It's also costly for councils, with some in the Hunter spending 3 times more on this election than the last 4 years ago.
This seems to be a gun at a head proposal. You've got no choice. The government calls the shots. This is what you've got to do. You can't argue about the cost.
Figures released by Port Stephens MP Craig Bowman show at least 6 councils paying double what they did in 2004. Newcastle and Lake Macquarie billed the most, which goes to the New South Wales Electoral Commission for running the ballots.
We're unable as individual councils or even collectively as a group to get real breakdowns on where these costs are going.
We wonder if those waiting in queues think the money is being well spent. Late this afternoon, thousands swarmed pre-polling stations. While for those of you who haven't already voted, the advice tomorrow would be to use your closest booth.
You can only vote in the ward for which you're enrolled.
Adam McIlrick, NBN News.
First, there was Clean Up Australia Day. Now there's Clean Up Throsby Month. That's Throsby Creek to be exact, which is surrounded by 5 inner-city suburbs from Islington to Carrington. The local community group today launched the Spring Spruce campaign, which will encourage residents to clean up their surrounds. Brooms will be given away for gutter sweeping, stopping rubbish entering the drains and the creek, while garbage is being removed from the mangroves by council staff and the Ulita Indigenous group.
We came down on Sunday to actually check the site out and were horrified at the amount of rubbish that gets washed down into the catchment.
Green Thumbs and first-time gardeners will compete for the Front Yard Fancy Up Awards, transforming the neighbourhood into a botanic wonderland complete with vibrant spring colours.
We want those people to just get out on the street, talk to each other, do a bit of planting and have some fun.
They'll also be doing their bit for the environment. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
It's become a real focal point of this A-League clash. Even Sydney FC coach John Kosmina is keen to see how his 2 Newcastle recruits handle their return to Jets territory. And there's no need to tell Stu Michalek and Mark Bridge of what to expect.
From the boys, I'm not really expecting a bad reaction because, like I said, I'm still good friends with majority of them and that sort of thing. But from the fans, I'm not expecting the best reaction. No.
I was getting booed last season and I was still playing for them, and they found out I was talking to Sydney.
It's a point not forgotten by Bridge. Despite his grand final heroics, the nature of his departure cuts deep.
No hard feelings up there with the players and the coaching staff, but everyone else, I think, me and Shuey can't wait to get out there to show some things.
Joe Wheelhouse just wants to restore some pride back into the Jet shirt after their last outing against Melbourne. He'll play against his good mate in Michalek for the first time in around a decade.
There's a tackle there to be won. I'm sure both won't hold back. And hopefully our squadron can give Stewie and Bridge here a bit of stick. I think we might need them to be that 12th man tomorrow night.
That's almost a certainty. Jim Callanan, NBN News. One of the most anticipated finals of the Games, and defending Paralympic champion Kurt Fearnley was happy to play cat and mouse for almost all of the 5 kilometres. A race of tactics, he duelled with rival David Weir from Great Britain, but on the final turn it was clear the real race was against the Sydney Games gold medalist from Thailand. Clearly upset with himself over the line, Fearnley showed the character of a winner.
I raced it as smart as what I could, but, Waharam was just too strong.
The physical and mental battle for Newcastle training partner Christy Dawes at these Games took another turn today. Back on track for a controversial re-race of the women's 5,000 metre final, she managed 6th, despite news officials have ruled her out of the marathon and suffering injury.
I had some trouble with some internal bleeding, which put me in hospital for the night, and it's quite sore. My gut's black and blue, but it's only pain.
Encouraging news late today also for Newcastle field athlete Kath Proudfoot, who put a real scare through the Aussie team when she was stretchered away from the shot put final. She's expected to be okay. It's all smiles though for Heath Francis, the 200 metre gold medalist, literally jogging home in his heat of the 400 metres. He's a firm favourite for his second gold, with another world record seemingly at his mercy.
Marks Point Public uses the active after-school program to keep kids on the go, and today at least, politicians too.
This program, any school that wants to be involved in it will be funded.
Introduced in 2005, the national program was in direct response to the so-called obesity epidemic, attributed in part to kids being inactive and sport too expensive.
So our program is letting them be involved in sport and gaining skills for no cost at all.
If that was the prac, then this was definitely the theory, as the Lower House's Standing Committee on Health and Ageing held an inquiry into obesity. Dr Gary Eggert from the Australian Lifestyle Medicine Association was among the witnesses, saying we should not be calling the health crisis an obesity epidemic.
So you can be fat and quite healthy, but you can be lean and be quite unhealthy. And that then indicates to us that obesity is a marker rather than a cause of disease.
He calls it a lifestyle epidemic, while Dr Claire Collins from the University of Newcastle told the inquiry that research shows poorer people need more help with leading healthier lifestyles. The nutritionist also called for fresh produce to be cheaper. The committee will now report the results back to Parliament. Adam McKilrick, NBN News.
Regardless of political alliances, local government candidates across the region had the same goal today, campaigning until the very last minute. All 350 are confident of their chances.
I think I'm in with a good shot. Anything could happen, I think, in this election. The sitting mayor, the past mayor, John Clarence, is retiring, so it's a fresh field.
We're getting great results today from the people coming up to the booth.
In Newcastle, the battle for Lord Mayor has been vicious.
It's been a real bitch fight, so to speak, and it's a shame, but I suppose the competition's on.
There's been a move by a number of candidates to target me personally, which is unfortunate. It says something about those people.
And the sniping wasn't restricted to the Newcastle electorate.
There has been some criticism levelled at me personally, which is something I haven't really encountered before, but that's par for the course.
Apart from having to queue for polling booths, Lake Macquarie voters had other gripes too.
There's confusion over where the boundaries are, people are being sent away, and obviously there needs to be a much better campaign of educating public.
While Maitland City faced its share of problems.
Earlier in the week, people were not aware that there was an election on today. Quite a number of people are trying to vote absentee and they can't, so there's a bit of annoyance there.
NBN will have the latest on the vote count tomorrow night. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Heath Francis entered these games in his best physical and mental shape ever, already with a 200-metre gold medal to his name, a blistering start in his pet event, the 400, and he was quickly powering to another as he rounded up the field. By the time they hit the bag straight, another gold was his. On world record pace, it was now a race against time. 47.69 seconds on corrected time. The first arm amputee to break the 48-second barrier. A stunning feat, and one quickly shared with his mum Margaret.
When I gave Mum a hug at the end there, which is really wonderful, and she had a tear in her eye, and it was really emotional, which means an awful lot to her as well.
Racing the 100s now for fun, he's in line for a rare sprint trifecta.
The way I'm going, I guess anything's possible.
He didn't want to be here. Simple as that.